Crimson Crossover Network. This is The Tide Machine with Charles Branch and Michael Southern. Welcome back to The Tide Machine. I am Charles Branch, and as always, joined by Michael Southern. No Alabama game this past weekend as we were off, but got a big one coming up this Saturday as we take on LSU. Even though they are no longer have their head coach, Brian Kelly has been processed, as we like to talk about. When Nick Saban was taking putting head coaches' skulls on his mantle back in the day at Alabama, but always a big game, and this will be a big game as well, of course, not only for this season, but as Alabama and Coach DeBoer continue to reestablish themselves as a dominant program. Michael, before we dive into it, how was your weekend watching other college football going on and not having to sweat out the Tide?
Stress-free. It's much more enjoyable to watch other teams play, and your team is in the clubhouse, so you don't have to worry about it. So, very relaxing, stress-free, and yes, not going to lie, you get to hate watch a little bit here and there. So that's always fun.
Yeah, it's always fun, and wherever you sit on conference realignment, whether you like it or not, what I can say about this college football season is it seems every weekend there are 4 or 5 really good high-profile games to get to watch. So when you do have an off week, it's really nice, like you said, to sit back. You can hate watch a little bit, but you're going to watch some phenomenal football games from 11 o'clock Central Time, as some people call God's time zone, all the way to about 9 or 10 o'clock at night. So great weekend of college football, but we're ready for Alabama to get back on the field and ready to get back in Bryant-Denny Stadium at Nick Saban Field as well, where we'll get to take on LSU. This has obviously been a series, a rivalry that's gotten a lot of publicity over the years. 2 programs that have been at the pinnacle of college football, 2 programs that shared a head coach in Nick Saban, of course, 2 programs that have played in game of the centuries multiple times. So you get to choose which one was actually the game of the century, I guess. But all of these have been phenomenal games. Alabama, even with the 2 programs being very strong, has come on top of a lot of these games in the past. And of course, we're hoping that to be the same this year. But excited to see this Alabama team, of course, take on LSU. But before we get into that, of course, we're here at the Tide Machine looking at the past, and we got some old games to talk about this week.
Yeah, so I know we're going to focus the games we're going to talk about mostly are going to be in Bryant-Denny, but this is the one exception. This is back in Baton Rouge. This is one of the ones that I always remember really well. Again, it's from the era that I grew up in. This is the 1985 season. We talked about some of the great comebacks that team had. And one of the overlooked, or not, I won't say forgotten, but overlooked comebacks that team had was when they played LSU down in Baton Rouge. Alabama had to put together basically a late fourth quarter drive led by Mike Shula. And I hate the circumstances that happened in South Carolina. And we talked about Mike Shula as both a player and a coach. But this was one of his defining moments as a player again. Now, not only with Alabama trailing 14-7 late in the fourth quarter, they put together a drive. He drives them down the field, and then to score the tying touchdown, they pull a trick play. So they actually do the little trick play where Shula goes out. Gene Jelks does a halfback pass back to Mike Shula. He scores. That ties at 14-14. And I know it's probably confusing to the younger generation, but back then there was no overtime. So teams played to a tie, and it looked weird when you had 3 numbers in your record. But that ended up being a 14-14 tie in a game that it looked like Alabama was going to lose down there. But Shula put together a heck of a drive. There's a lot of things in that game going into it. A lot of, relationships and connections between the 2 programs. So don't forget, Mike Shula, son of legendary coach Don Shula. Well, the coach for LSU that year was Bill Arnsparger. Well, what did Bill Arnsparger used to do? He used to be Don Shula's defensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. Mike Shula grew up knowing Bill Arnsparger as a little kid when he was running balls out for the Dolphins. So you had that connection going on there with Bill Arnsparger as the LSU head coach, Mike Shula as the quarterback for Alabama, leading him on the drive and then scoring the game-tying touchdown. So that 85 season, still overall a magical season. I know it was 9-2-1, but some of those victories and that one tie, very memorable. And that was the first time that I remember such a wild and thrilling finish, even though it was a tie against LSU. So that's one of the more memorable LSU games that sticks with me even to this day as I look back at the series.
Well, and that tie is part of that 30-year streak where Alabama never lost in Death Valley,
That's
which is
right.
still, I think, one of the most impressive streaks that doesn't really get talked about anymore because, it did end in 2000 when LSU decided to hire a guy from Michigan State called Nick Saban. And they had a little bit more success, of course, in Baton Rouge, but Alabama has just dominated this series in Baton Rouge specifically. And we talked a little bit about last week that LSU has found a little bit more success when they played in Tuscaloosa. Yeah, and I think I said it too. If they hadn't found success in Tuscaloosa, this be like Alabama versus Vanderbilt. This
Yep.
wouldn't necessarily be a rivalry. But that you think about LSU's football program and to think that they went 30 years without winning a home game in against Alabama is really just kind of mind-boggling with how much LSU and Death Valley and night games in Death Valley are talked about and how of a tough of a place of a play tough of a place it is to play for Alabama to have success like that is just unbelievable.
Well, think of it kind of like this. It's not like the talent in that state wasn't there. It still goes back to they could never get the right coach in there. I mean, you got to have the right person to put it together, but they kind of tripped over things, every 5 years. Bill Arnsparger had a pretty good run there in the mid '80s. Mike Archer had somewhat of a run, but for the most part, no consistency, no dominant coach until you really got to the era of Nick Saban, who really pumped that program with like jet fuel, and then all the successors until Brian Kelly had at least enough success to go out there and win a national championship. But that was a long time dormant program that should have been much better than it was during that 30-year period.
Well, and another thing that I remember from that 85 game, at least from watching highlights, that I think you post of Cornelius Bennett blocking a punt and returning it for a touchdown, is it was the white helmets with crimson numbers.
Hey, no matter what, whenever I post anything with a video with those teams wearing white helmets, Cornelius is all over that. He loves the white helmets, so he is definitely a proponent of bringing back the white helmets at least for one game.
If we did bring him back for a game, that is a pretty nice look of all white helmets, white jerseys, white tops. Obviously, we wear crimson jerseys at home. And I think you have to, if you're going to bring back white helmets, they have to be for a home game or the fan base would just lose it. Would you pull a Penn State and have a whiteout game where you wear your road uniforms with white helmets? I mean, I know they've worn white helmets with crimson in the past, going back to the Bryant days and stuff like that. But as you, someone who saw Alabama play in white helmets, if they ever had a game like that in Tuscaloosa, how would you dress the team for the game?
Okay, so if Alabama's going to wear the white helmets, if they can do this, I don't even know if there's SEC regulations or rules of saying home team has to wear dark colors or what. I don't know, but let's do it in September when it's hot and go all white. So at least let's do it that way. Let's take advantage of the fact that we're going to wear all white so we don't get as hot, and we'll do it in like mid-September against somebody.
Should we also just, make the traditionalists lose it and do the houndstooth trim like we did in 2006 for that one game against Ole Miss?
Well, look, I believe in tradition too. There are certain things I would hate to see change or altered, but look, there's a lot of different things going on right now in this whole universe of college athletics. So people should get used to change because guys, changes are coming, and it's not just football. It's about to be sweeping across the board with all kinds of things, whether it's again, we talked about how they generate revenue, how they want to do this, how they want to dress, how they want to have sponsorships, how they want to have naming rights. Everything is going to be up for grabs over the next couple of years.
Well, and I promise we'll turn away from the Fashion Network here in just a second. But another one, a piece of, I guess, Alabama uniform that never gets talked about that happened when I was a younger kid, and it was really for one season, and it wasn't like all over the place. But I remember the '96 Alabama Auburn game, which we talked a little bit last week, is one of my favorite plays with Dennis Riddle. But at halftime, they unveiled the Bear Bryant stamp that they, sent used for a little bit. And if I remember correctly, that became kind of like a helmet sticker on the side. You know how Georgia used to have the dog bones on their helmet, how Ohio State has the Buckeye on their helmet, how Florida State used to do the spears on their helmet. It wasn't all over the place, but I feel like I remember that 97 team had a couple guys with several stamps at times on the back of their helmet. I know Nick Saban's already got a field named after him. Maybe they'll come out with the Nick Saban stamp at some point too, and that'll be on the helmet. But there is a little bit, even though Alabama has one of the more traditional uniforms that everybody loves and says don't change it, there have been some alterations at times that I think the fan base would like to see come back for a special moment or two in a season.
Real quickly, we already know they used to wear white helmets. They would wear white helmets with crimson jerseys. They would wear all white. And let's not forget, they used to have numbers on the sleeves. So you also had the numbers on the sleeves at one time too. So that happened too. Go back and look at some historical video and you can see that. So what Alabama is wearing today is not exactly what they wore 30, 40, 50 years ago to a T. It has changed. So I suspect there could be minor changes here and there in the future. Maybe nothing drastic, but things do change.
No, no. Well, we'll get back to the games, and I know you had another game that you wanted to talk about from the 1980s as well.
Yeah, so the only other one I wanted to mention as we talked about LSU week from a historical perspective, 1988. Again, this is a loss. Alabama lost by the peculiar score of 19-18. But the reason this resonates with me is because this is the first Alabama LSU game I saw in person. So I had tickets to that one. Me and a friend from school, we went to that game. I remember it was a great day, it was beautiful weather. Alabama was still suffering from that loss to Ole Miss for homecomings. They were still in the SEC race. The loser of this game probably would have been out because I believe LSU had already lost to Florida. So this was an important game. Alabama comes out on fire, 15-0. And I'm sitting there thinking, all right, I think we're going to get this one. And then no, LSU comes back. Tommy Hodson, who got benched, comes back, leads them back. They come back, they kick a field goal to take a weird 19-18 lead because at some point LSU went for two and did not get it because Alabama had a weird 18-15 or 18-16 lead. That's what it was. So odd combination. If you had the grid, you get some numbers you didn't think you were going to win money on. But the thing about that one is the first half was great. And then I also remember the fact you had some key injuries. Murray Hill went out with an injury, a severe injury too. I mean, I think they brought the stretcher out. Everyone was concerned he might be paralyzed. It looked like a severe neck injury. Howard Cross, who went on to have a great NFL career, he goes out. So Alabama had two key injuries, blew a 15-point lead, still had a chance to win. Philip Doyle comes out, attempts, I believe it's a 59-yard field goal. Philip had plenty of leg, just 2 feet wide to the right. Because when he kicked it, we were watching it. We thought he had it. It looked good for a second, and then it just slowly but surely veered to the right as time expired. So both a fun memory in the fact that it was my first LSU game, but a terrible ending, and still not over the fact that we blew a 15-0 lead in the first half. That one was a little frustrating.
The Alabama was up 15-0 in the first half, played great, ended up losing 19-18. Are you saying that it was a tale of two halves?
Oh yes, let's go down the Avery Johnson path. It was definitely a tale of two halves. There's no doubt about that. And I don't think Bill Curry came out and said that it was a great opportunity like Mike Dubose would say. But yes, a tale of two halves.
What year of the Bill Curry tenure would that have been while he was at Alabama?
That would have been his second year. So
Okay.
Curry was here in 87, 88, and 89. So that was right in the middle. And then again, the fan base was already mad at him for losing that Ole Miss game where, remember they didn't complete one pass. So that was the 20-12 homecoming loss to Ole Miss and the urban legend that somebody threw a brick through his window.
Well, I know he got a lot of flack for not winning a lot of those big games against your main rivals and stuff like that. So an unfortunate day for you for your first Alabama LSU game, but fortunately you've been able to watch a lot more Alabama wins, hopefully, as the years have gone on.
I have rectified that. I have seen a lot more times now in person Alabama beat LSU, which thankfully helps ease that memory a little bit.
Well, I'm gonna kick off my first game being the 1999 game. And so you probably see a rhythm with a lot of, the games that we've talked about we talked a lot about 1985, talked a lot about 1999 and 2005 and 2015. We may not be talking about that 1999 season as much if Alabama doesn't have a goal line stand against a really bad LSU team in the final seconds, and come away with the 23-17 victory. So I remember watching the game on TV, an 11 o'clock Jefferson Pilot game, to show you how much this game has changed, that it has now become primetime TV, not only for ESPN and ABC this weekend, but CBS typically bumped it to the 7 o'clock spot, when Coach Saban was on the sidelines. But 11 o'clock Jefferson Pilot game, you had Sean Alexander, who was playing on a bad ankle. You had Tyler Watts, who was starting for Andrew Zhao, who was still banged up, and probably one of the ugliest games that Bryant Denny has ever seen as it relates to turnovers. Both teams turned the ball over 4 times apiece. Josh Booty threw 4 interceptions. I think 3 of them on consecutive drives. Tyler Watts threw 2 interceptions and had a fumble on a snap. Alabama ended up having a 23-7 lead midway through the third quarter. And after another Josh Booty interception was on their side of the 50-yard line. And for some reason, the staff decided to put a banged up Andrew Zhao in at quarterback. And I don't know if it was to get him reacclimated after getting hurt against Tennessee, since he had not played against Southern Miss the week before. And Zhao came in and did fine, but eventually threw a screen pass that got intercepted by an LSU defensive lineman, ran all the way back for a touchdown to make it 23-14. LSU would tack on a field goal later, but Alabama had the ball, was driving late in the fourth quarter, put together a drive that you would expect to go win the game, had a 27-yard field goal attempt that was pushed to the right, and then LSU mounts a furious drive, getting all the way eventually to the 1 yard line, no timeouts, 21 seconds left. Had plenty of time because it was first and goal. They hit a tight end kind of on a throwback a little bit that he caught it and fell down at the 1 yard line. Had plenty of time to go up and spike the ball, but opted to run a play, which was Josh Booty rolling out, and eventually he tried to tuck it and run. And that Alabama defense, led by Marvin Constant, Salim Rashid, I think Reggie Miles was also in the play, had a huge goal line stand right there, stopping him basically at the 6 inch line. Marvin Constant ended up getting hurt on the play with about 10 seconds left, but the officials made the decision to keep the clock running. LSU tried to get a playoff, couldn't get it off, and Alabama basically escaped with the 23-17 victory. And so as a young kid, I always grew up with that kind of being like my goal line stand moment of Alabama football. Had seen all the images of the goal line stand against Penn State, and that clearly does not replace this goal line stand. It's almost like a forgotten goal line stand, probably because of how bad LSU was. But it was an incredible effort by all 4 or 5 of those Alabama defenders to stop Josh Booty because he had a lot of momentum. He went up in the air, and they basically pushed him sideways to keep that ball from crossing the plane. It was also an unfortunate play because Marvin Constant did get hurt on the play. And I wanted you, Michael, to kind of talk a little bit about Marvin and that play and that injury and what it ended up doing to his career.
Yeah, so I was covering the game that year again for the Tuscaloosa News. So we were down on the sideline again. Media goes down on the field with about 5 minutes left. So we're literally right there at the goal line, watching the play develop and everything happen. Seeing LSU come down, have a chance to win. And yes, let's not forget, in light of everything, had Alabama made the field goal, they're probably not as worried about letting them score a touchdown because the game would have already been won. But nevertheless, one of the forgotten players in Alabama lore now is Marvin Constant. And for the generation that is not familiar with the name Marvin Constant, let me tell you, he played linebacker at Central Tuscaloosa, and he was really, really good. He was a high school star. he was built like a tank. He was like rock solid. He looked like he was cut out of granite. He was an important piece on that linebacking core. And unfortunately, on that play, as they're taking or stopping Josh Booty, he suffers a knee injury. So at the time, no one realized how significant or how severe that injury was going to be. But turns out, at first, everyone thought that Marvin was just now unfortunately lost for the season. No, it ended his career. Marvin never got to play again, which is sad. It falls right along the lines with Tyrone Prothro in 2005. Alabama fans and more importantly, the players themselves got robbed of better things as far as a playing career. I have no doubt Tyrone Prothro would have found his way to the NFL had he stayed healthy, and I say the same thing for Marvin Constant. So I feel awful that those two were robbed of a chance to keep playing football and maybe have a chance to play professionally, because I think Marvin Constant would have. I thought he was that good, but again, Marvin never played again, which is a shame because he would have been someone that everyone would have remembered had he played a full 3 to 4 year career for the University of Alabama.
Well, I remember there was so much confusion after that play as well because you didn't really know, at least the TV announcers didn't know initially who was hurt. You know, that there were, I think one of them said they thought it was Reggie Miles or Milo Lewis. But as I mentioned, he goes down with about 10 seconds left in the game. And the clock should have run out. LSU had that play, in a normal circumstance would have never had an opportunity to get that play off. But I do remember just the confusion of Jerry DiNardo standing on the sidelines with his headset on for at least a good 2 to 3 minutes after that play happened and wondering, are the officials going to come back out and put time on the clock and give LSU another opportunity? And, the whole Alabama team came onto the field to celebrate, but then quickly ran over to the goal line and was kind of huddled up around Marvin Constant at the time as well, too. Coach Dubose went over there and then probably shook hands with DiNardo. I do know the officials were pretty adamant that the game was over because I think they ran off the field pretty quickly. But kind of just a wild scene, a wild game. Jerry DiNardo, I think, was a fired coach at LSU at that point. I think, this was back in the day where you could fire a coach midway through the year and still let him coach to the end of the season. Now they just try to get those guys out of there as quick as they can, and maybe those guys want to get out of there as quick as they can too to cash their buyout checks and stuff like that. But an odd game, but fortunately for Alabama, great to come out on top. Would eventually have a huge game the next week at home against Mississippi State, where they would win the West, go on to the SEC championship, and make history, adding another SEC championship trophy into the trophy case that year.
Now, 99 was also a special year. I remember covering that. That was overall take away the Louisiana Tech loss. Outside of that, that was still a fun season to cover. They had some big victories, and anytime you beat Florida twice in 1 year is pretty sweet. And that LSU loss, yeah, that marked the end of the Jerry DiNardo era. Again, a long string of coaches that just did not fit. You had already gone through Mike Archer, Curly Hallman, Jerry DiNardo, and then lo and behold, you just kind of stumbled into somebody named Nick Saban, and then now we can't get rid of LSU. They're right there in our face every year.
Well, the other game I want to talk about was I was in as a student at University of Alabama. It's the 2009 Alabama LSU game. A massive game. The third time of Nick Saban facing against LSU and Les Miles. And remember going into that game, a lot of angst about the Alabama offense. So Alabama was undefeated at the time. We've talked about, the game against South Carolina where you had the interception to basically start the game from Mark Barron, and Mark Ingram had the fourth quarter drive where he basically put the team on his back. But the offense was really struggling at that point. We also talked about Rocky Block, of course, with Terrence Cody, where we won 12-10 and didn't score an offensive touchdown. Alabama went midway through that season where they had one offensive touchdown at Ole Miss in a really highly billed game. That's when Ole Miss had Houston Nutt as their head coach and Jevin Sneed, and everybody thought, as everybody always thinks, this is Ole Miss's year. Well, again, they fell short against Alabama, but came away with that game scoring 22 points, but only having one offensive touchdown. The next week was that South Carolina game where you win 20-6, but with only one offensive touchdown. And then you play Tennessee where you score 12 points, don't score any offensive touchdowns, go into the bye week, and in the first half against LSU, you still don't put the ball in the end zone. That game ended up going into halftime 7-3. Alabama comes out, starts the second half. Greg McElroy hits Darius Hanks on a corner route right in front of the student section. And I do remember kind of this just big exhale from Alabama fans. It felt like that we finally, had gotten the ball back in the end zone after, at least 6 quarters of not finding the end zone. LSU would eventually, take the lead again. I believe they got a McElroy in the end zone for safety and then scored a touchdown. It was 15-10 going into the fourth quarter. Early in the fourth quarter, we were driving, got it with a goal to go goal situation, and I remember we got a legal substitution penalty on offense. Julio Jones, we had 12 men in the huddle. Julio Jones was not supposed to be on the field. He didn't lead the field quick enough, and again, where we were excited that we had the first touchdown, that frustration started coming back of we can't seem to put the ball in the end zone. We ended up getting a field goal out of it, but would then get the ball back and a very iconic play in Alabama history. First play of that drive, screen pass to Julio Jones. He goes 79 yards for an Alabama touchdown. We ended up winning the game by two scores. Um, and, after winning that game, we would, of course, still have some tough games, had the tough game against Auburn, but had secured the SEC West at that point. We knew we were going to have a rematch against Florida in the SEC championship game. And the excitement was just continuing to build and build and build of what that team could accomplish as far as being in the BCS national championship game, where we're still ranked number 2 in the BCS. And of course, as we know, beat Florida, beat Texas, and would be the first national championship for Nick Saban at Alabama.
So again, fortunate enough that I was covering the game. If you remember on that pass to Julio Jones where he had that iconic run, they knew exactly what they were doing because Patrick Peterson. They took him out of the game for one play. They saw as soon as Patrick Peterson left the field, I think McElwain and the whole crew saw it, and they said, "Go to Julio." Julio gets the ball, and the rest is history. What we talked about this, or I gave you kind of a hint of something funny that happened after the game. So after the game, Tommy Dees and I are leaving the stadium because we always rode together. So I'm driving, and he says, "Hey, you know what? It's nighttime. We should be able to pick up WWL out of New Orleans, 7:80 a.m. because they always power up when the sun goes down." He said, "Let's listen to the call-in show." Let me tell you, if you have never listened to an LSU post-game radio show after a loss, you are missing just a treat. It is the funniest stuff you will ever hear. So as we're pulling out from Bryant Denny driving back to the Tuscaloosa News, we have perfect timing. The host is talking about the play to Julio Jones. He said the same thing we did. Hey, they saw that, Patrick Peterson, they had to take him out. I think Patrick may have been injured or hurt momentarily, but he mentioned that. So they go to a caller, 100% Cajun caller. He gets on there, and I'm going to try to do a Cajun accent. I'm not very good at it, but he calls onto the radio and tells the host, everybody, everybody knows Julio Jones is going to get the ball then. Why are we not on him like bees on honey? He's on honey. He's on honey. He said that about 5 times to the host. It was the funniest thing I have ever heard on sports calling radio. This Cajun is just going off on the fact that the LSU defense did not realize that the ball was going to go to Julio Jones in that play. But he literally said, "He's on honey. Bees on honey," over and over. Tommy and I laughed so hard all the way back to the newspaper. It was the funniest thing I'd ever heard on LSU postgame radio before. So now, if I'm out and about and there's a night game and LSU loses, I try. If I'm in the car, I'll turn that AM dial to 870 because I want to hear some of the call-in shows on WWL out of New Orleans.
That's awesome. And that's impressive that after 16 years, I mean, that shows how iconic it was and stuck
Oh,
with you that you can remember it that well.
you don't forget a Cajun saying "bees on honey" like 5 times in a
No,
row to a radio host.
no. Well, I'm probably the leader of the William Vlahos fan club. I also remember that from that game, William was named SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week. And on that screen pass, playing center, he pulled from his center position and was kind of the last guy to chip that linebacker that would have been coming out to get Julio Jones. So it's kind of another one of those iconic plays that even though I didn't talk about it last week, I still remember very well, obviously with William being involved. But where we were in the student section, um, you knew as soon as Julio caught it that if he got past that first guy, he was gone. He had the speed and it just opened up and, running right by that Alabama sidelines as well. Just an awesome play on an awesome night. And just continued that march eventually to the Rose Bowl. And like I said, that first Nick Saban national championship. Well, to use your quote, bees on honey, I'd love to see this Alabama defensive line and linebackers be on Garrett Nussmeier like bees on honey this weekend and get after him. It's going to be very interesting, of course. LSU's in a period of transition with Brian Kelly being fired. I do think they have a pretty good interim coach, and I believe his name's Frank Wilson, but he was the Texas San Antonio coach previously, so he's got some head coaching experience. I mean, if you've watched an LSU game, if you've seen some of these comments from former LSU players and even former Notre Dame players, they didn't really care for Brian Kelly. So it'll be interesting to see how that team kind of, if this galvanizes them, if this kind of allows them to rally around each other and what kind of spirit they come out with. But uh, I obviously like our team. I like the mentality that we've had throughout the year. I'm sure in this off week, knowing what happened last year at Oklahoma, where they were in position but let it slip away, that they're going to be very focused on the task at hand. There may be some new wrinkles that they see, but they've been through the adversity. They know how to fight through it, and I'm very excited for that 6:30 Central Time kickoff on ABC. Or yeah, it'll be on ABC. I'm a YouTube TV subscriber, so
Oh no.
might have to find a different location to go watch the game.
Oh,
But very excited to get to this Saturday. Michael, what are your thoughts about the game this Saturday?
I what I want to see from Alabama is the best way to take care of LSU, and this for regardless of whether they have a full-time head coach or interim head coach. Jump on them early and take them out of the game. I mean, I hate to say it, but traditionally LSU, they're not a come from behind team. So if you can get on them early and hold them down, I won't say they quit, but let's just say the fight's not necessarily there all the time. But I want to see how fresh Alabama looks. They needed the bye week. Let's see if they come out sharp. Hopefully they won't be rusty. I want to see if they come out sharp, execute. Let's get some touchdowns early. Like I said, get on them early, get the crowd into it, and do not let that team have an opportunity to mount any kind of challenge and think they can stay in the game.
Well, and I think the crowd support's been phenomenal this year. I think Coach DeBoer has probably talked about that. I know it was phenomenal at the Alabama Tennessee game, and now this is the first game since Alabama Tennessee, and again, it's at 6:30, a night game, so people will be excited. Yes, I imagine if Alabama can jump on LSU, the crowd is not going to let up. Everybody loves, beating LSU. Auburn, LSU, and Tennessee too,
See two. Yep.
as it goes. So no, it's an exciting time. November was for early in the 2000s. November was not a fun time to be an Alabama football fan. A lot of times we were already out of it and just didn't have the depth in a lot of those games to be able to finish games. We've talked about that a lot in the Mike Shula era, but now we know November's winning time and we've got the guys to do it, and hopefully we can add another win to the win column this Saturday night.
Let's have a sweep. I want to see Alabama basketball take down number 5 St. John's, and let's see Alabama number 4 Alabama take care of LSU. Let's go for the doubleheader on Saturday.
Well, we have had that good luck at times when we've had double headers. So yes, that would be awesome to put together too. And they're spaced out enough as well. So you can watch that Alabama game at 11 o'clock Central Time on Fox Sports 1 against St. John's and then have plenty of time for that Alabama LSU game. And since you mentioned basketball, we got a ton of things going on at Crimson Crossover right now. We have our Crimson Crossover podcast as part of the Field of 68 network. You, Michael, and Emily have started the Blue Collar podcast, also part of Crimson Crossover. Excited for y'all to get that off the ground. I've got Crimson Crossover Cross Court, where I'm talking to podcasters, fans, beat writers of former teams excited to be doing that and kind of getting some insights into our opponents before we play them. And of course, we've still got the M3 show with Matthew, Mac, and Josh. We've got golf adjacent with Ken and Claycomb. We've got tons of content at Crimson Crossover. If you haven't already, subscribe to Crimson Crossover, subscribe to all of our X accounts, like our stuff, retweet it, and as always, send us questions, send us thoughts, send us comments. We're always looking for ways that we can present more content to Alabama fans from Alabama fans. So, with that, I think we'll wrap up this episode. Michael, have a safe Saturday. Let's get a W and roll tide.
Yeah, let's get two. Roll Tide.
The Paul W. Bryant Museum is a captivating destination for sports enthusiasts and fans of the University of Alabama football program. Located in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, the museum is dedicated to preserving the legacy of the legendary coach Paul Bear Bryant. The Paul W. Bryant Museum showcases a remarkable collection of memorabilia, including trophies, photographs, and artifacts that span Bryant's career and the rich history of Alabama football. Visitors can explore interactive exhibits and learn about the team's storied past, making the Paul W. Bryant Museum a must-visit for any football aficionado. Fans can also experience exhibits highlighting success of both the Alabama men's basketball and women's softball programs. Open Tuesday through Sunday. Plan your visit today and experience the rich tradition of Alabama athletics. Roll Tide.